soft, melancholic piano music begins, the cameras weren't rolling. The red carpet was nowhere to be seen. But when Pamela Anderson spoke those 7 words, the entertainment world stopped breathing. Some people cook, some people perform. It was a response so sharp, so unexpectedly raw, that it cut through years of Hollywood pretense like a blade through silk. The target: Meghan Markle's latest venture into lifestyle television, the aftermath. A cascade of emotions that nobody saw coming. Asterisk music transitions to more dramatic undertones. Asterisk, but to understand why those words hit so hard, you have to go back. Way back to a small town in British Columbia, where a girl named Pamela Denise Anderson first learned that beauty could be both a blessing and a curse. Asterisk gentle acoustic guitar joins the soundtrack. Asterisk 1967. Ladysmith, Canada. A carpenter's daughter is born on July 1st, Canada Day. As if fate itself was marking her as something special. Something destined for the world stage. Young Pamela didn't know it yet, but she was carrying a secret that would both elevate her and haunt her for decades. A trauma buried so deep that even when she finally spoke about it, the world struggled to listen. Music becomes more somber. Picture this. Little girl, blonde curls catching the afternoon sun, playing in her backyard while her parents worked to make ends meet. She's innocent. She's trusting. She has no idea that the adults around her are about to steal something she can never get back. The abuse started young, too young. A babysitter who crossed lines that should never be crossed. A relative who saw opportunity in vulnerability. By the time Pamela was 12, she had survived more darkness than most adults ever face. But she learned something in those shadows. She learned to perform, to create a version of herself that could survive. To build walls so high that nobody could see the little girl crying inside. Asterisk music shifts to a more hopeful, ascending melody. Asterisk fast forward to 1989, BC. Place Stadium in Vancouver. A football game that would change everything. 22-year-old Pamela is in the stands wearing a Labatt's beer t-shirt. The camera finds her. The crowd goes wild. In that moment, a star is born. But it's not the real Pamela they're cheering for. It's the performance, the fantasy. The carefully crafted image of the perfect Canadian girl. The modeling contracts came fast. Playboy noticed, then television. Then Hollywood itself came calling with an offer she couldn't refuse. Asterisk upbeat 90s style music begins. Asterisk Baywatch. 2 words that would define a generation's idea of beauty, drama, and oceanside heroics. Pamela Anderson didn't just play C.J. Parker. She became her. The slow-motion runs, the red swimsuit, the blonde hair flowing in perfect waves. But here's what the cameras didn't show. Behind the glamour, behind the magazine covers and the worldwide fame, Pamela was still that little girl from Ladysmith, still performing, still protecting herself the only way she knew how. Asterisk. Music becomes more intense. Asterisk the late 90s brought new challenges. Marriage to Tommy Lee, the drummer from Mötley Crüe. It seemed like a fairy tale at first. 2 wild spirits finding each other in the chaos of celebrity. But fairy tales have a way of turning dark. The honeymoon video. Stolen from their home, distributed without their consent across the early internet. In 2023, we have words for this. We call it revenge porn. We understand the trauma. We recognize the violation. But in 1998, Pamela Anderson was treated like a willing participant in her own humiliation. The world laughed. They pointed. They made jokes about the very thing that was destroying her from the inside out. Asterisk somber piano returns. Asterisk. Imagine this moment. You're one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. Your most intimate moments have been broadcast to millions. And instead of sympathy, you get judgment. Instead of support, you get shame. Pamela did what she always did. She performed. She smiled for the cameras. She made appearances. She pretended it didn't hurt, but it did hurt. It hurt in ways that the public would never understand. Music builds dramatically. The years that followed were a blur of relationships, projects, and public scrutiny. David Hasselhoff once said about their Baywatch days, Pamela was always searching for something. Something real in a world that only wanted her to be fake. She tried reality TV. She tried acting in films. She tried reinventing herself over and over again. But the world had decided who Pamela Anderson was supposed to be. And that person wasn't allowed to be complex, intelligent, or vulnerable. Enter the 2000s. New relationships, Kid Rock, Rick Salomon. Each romance played out in the tabloids like a soap opera written by people who had never met her. The public watched every move, every mistake. Every moment of happiness was scrutinized. Every heartbreak was entertainment. Melancholic strings joined the composition. But something was changing. Slowly, quietly. Pamela Anderson was finding her voice beyond the performance. She became an activist. Animal rights, environmental causes. She spoke out about factory farming, about ocean pollution, about the treatment of indigenous peoples. The woman who had been reduced to a swimsuit and a slow-motion run was revealing layers that Hollywood had never bothered to explore. Still, the world wasn't ready to listen. Every interview about her activism was derailed by questions about her love life. Every serious statement was overshadowed by paparazzi photos and gossip columns. Music transitions to a more reflective tone. Then came Netflix. 2022. Pamela, a love story. For the first time in decades, Pamela Anderson was telling her own story. In her own words, without the filter of tabloid journalism or Hollywood narrative, the world watched in stunned silence as she spoke about the abuse, the trauma, the way fame had both saved her and trapped her. The real woman behind the performance finally stepped into the light. But here's the thing about truth. It's uncomfortable. It makes people squirm. It forces us to confront our own complicity in someone else's pain. Dramatic pause in music, which brings us to last month. Meghan Markle announces her new Netflix cooking show. My reactions are mixed. Some are excited, others are skeptical. The usual celebrity discourse plays out across social media. Then comes the interview. A reporter asks Pamela Anderson about the trend of celebrities moving into lifestyle content. The question seems innocent enough. Pamela's response is not what anyone expects. Some people cook, some people perform. 7 words, delivered with the kind of quiet intensity that comes from someone who has spent decades watching others craft perfect lives for public consumption. Music becomes more tense, the room goes quiet. The interviewer shifts uncomfortably, because everyone understands exactly who she's talking about, and more importantly, what she's really saying. It's not about cooking shows. It's not even about Meghan Markle specifically. It's about authenticity in an age of performance. It's about the difference between living your truth and curating your truth for maximum palatability. Softer music returns. The backlash was swift. Social media erupted. Teams of publicists went into overdrive. But something unexpected happened too. People started sharing their own stories. Stories about performance versus authenticity. About the masks we all wear. About the price of being constantly on for public consumption. Pamela's words had touched something deeper than celebrity gossip. They had hit the nerve of modern existence itself. Music builds to emotional crescendo, but for Pamela, the reaction was bittersweet. Because once again, her truth was being dissected by people who had never lived it. Once again, she was trending for all the wrong reasons. That night, sources say, she called her sons, Brandon and Dylan, the 2 people who know her not as Pamela Anderson, the celebrity, but as mom, the woman who makes terrible jokes and burns dinner and cries during commercials for animal shelters. I just wanted people to think, she reportedly told them. I wanted them to ask themselves what's real and what's performance, because I've spent my whole life blurring that line and it nearly destroyed me. Music becomes more contemplative. The sad irony wasn't lost on anyone who really listened. Here was a woman who had spent decades being reduced to a caricature, finally speaking her truth about authenticity. And the world's response was to turn it into another performance piece. The memes started immediately. The commentary, the think pieces. Everyone had an opinion about what Pamela Anderson meant, who she was targeting, and why she said what she said. But very few people asked the most important question. What was she trying to tell us about ourselves? Gentle piano melody, because that's what this story is really about. It's not about celebrity feuds or cooking shows or social media drama. It's about the exhaustion of performing your life for an audience that will never be satisfied. It's about a woman who became famous for running in slow motion, who was victimized by technology she didn't understand, who was judged for choices she never made, and who, despite everything, kept trying to use her platform for something meaningful. Music swells with hope in the weeks following the interview. Something beautiful happened. Pamela's documentary numbers surged again. People were finally ready to hear her story. Not the tabloid version, not the Baywatch version. Her version. The cooking show controversy faded, because when real truth meets manufactured drama, truth has a way of outlasting the noise. Today, Pamela Anderson lives quietly. She tends to her garden. She advocates for causes close to her heart. She's learning, she says, to exist without performing every moment for an invisible audience. Asterisk music becomes softer, more intimate asterisk, and maybe that's the real lesson here. In a world obsessed with content creation and personal branding, perhaps, the most radical act is simply being human, imperfect, unfiltered, real. Pamela Anderson's 7 words weren't an attack on anyone specific. They were a mirror held up to all of us. A question we're all grappling with in the age of social media. Where does the performance end and the person begin? Final musical flourish, the answer, like Pamela herself, is more complicated than it appears on the surface. Perhaps that's exactly the point. Maybe it's time we all stopped performing long enough to ask ourselves, what would our lives look like if we weren't constantly trying to impress an audience we'll never meet? That little girl from Ladysmith is still asking that question. And maybe, after all these years, she's finally ready to hear the answer. Music fades to silence if this story made you think differently about authenticity, performance, and the price of fame. Let us know in the comments below. What masks do you wear? When do you feel most like yourself? Hit that subscribe button for more untold stories behind the headlines. Because every celebrity narrative has layers the tabloids never show you. And remember, behind every performance is a person, just trying to figure out who they really are. Soft outro music.